From Fox 8 Sports, this is the Overtime Podcast.
From the Fox 8 studios in New Orleans, this is the Fox 8 Overtime Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Fazende, riding shotgun as he does each and every podcast. Is Andre Johnson
Jr.
Not forget the Jr. It's very important to remember the JR at the end of the name. Before we get into today's content, be sure to like, share, rate, review if you are watching us on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button. Get the bell notification for when we drop that fire content. And hello to the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network. Glad you have found us here. It's Monday and Andre's back in session. Man, I had to roll solo. I had to sit in that chair. I was scrambling around on Friday trying to figure it out. And at the last second, we were able to make it work. And I was so concerned about talking for 27 minutes, which is the length of our podcast. But I went crazy on the laptop and it just had every single note available. It flowed pretty well. But nonetheless, it is good to have you back in session, sir.
You know, it's good to be back. I hear you didn't forget the Junior when
I did not
referred to me, but you did forget to tell the people to not forget the Junior.
Dang. Okay, my bad.
So that would have killed another 5 seconds right there. That would have made it a little easier.
Fortunately, I wasn't struggling for content because Friday was a big day because Brandon Staley was made official, what we had speculated about, what we had widely expected. Actually came to fruition on Friday. We got it all confirmed, and the addition of Brandon Staley was a huge podcast topic that I was able to divide up into a lot of. I thought you were pointing at me there. You're doing your own different. I'm like, something wrong? I got some on my shirt here. But anyway, so we were able to get that done. But it's good to be back with you, sir, because it was a little. You got to manage at times, but it's good to be back with the regular approach to this podcast. How was your weekend?
You know, it was good. I went to WWE events over the weekend, SmackDown, saw Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, who just kind of showed up and did his thing. He was electric. You know, he announced that WrestleMania is coming to New Orleans the year after the city just got the Super Bowl. So now essentially the Super Bowl of the WWE is coming to the city, and I know New Orleans, just like they put on a party and a show for the Super Bowl, they will also hold it down for WrestleMania. So a lot of exciting things coming up.
Yeah, I had an interesting weekend myself. You ever had do you eat sushi?
The whole raw fish thing. I know all sushi
you eat the rolls?
raw.
Do you do the rolls?
I've tried it before, but I've never gotten too deep into it.
Well, we ended up having a king cake and sushi party at my house.
That's
an
interesting combination right there.
We had a chef that used to work at one of the higher end, one of the more popular sushi spots in town. I'll reserve the name, but he came by. So Benny hooked it up, and he brings all new stuff that you're not going to find on the menu. So completely original. Had a bunch of people come over, so we had a blast. And then Sunday, I was at a cheer competition at UNO for both my kids. One early in the morning, one late in the evening over at UNO. It was a nasty day Sunday, but we were able to get that done. So fun weekend. Got a lot accomplished. Sounds like you got a lot accomplished. But we are back, locked and loaded for this Monday podcast. And we could have went a lot of different ways today, but we had this topic kind of in our back pocket last week, but some other stuff had sort of developed. So we decided to save it, but it's important to get to this because things can change very quickly in this offseason, especially this week because the Combine is going to be here, and that's where news happens because anytime a lot of these teams get together, a lot of chatter, a lot of business gets done, happens at the Senior Bowl, happens at the Combine, happens at a lot of these pro days that you see. It just is what it is. So that's where we're going to go with the big picture today, and we're going to talk about the most unique player for the Saints, Taysom Hill.
Yeah, you know, on this podcast, we've talked about quarterbacks, running backs, tight ends, fullbacks, special teams. Today, we're going to talk about all of those packaged up into one human being. Taysom Hill, he played 8 games last year for the Saints. He played well in those 8 games. He got injured, missed the end of the season. So now as we look ahead to the 2025 campaign, and you know the Saints are going to have to clear about, $47 million in cap. We asked the question, what should the Saints do with Taysom Hill this offseason?
Well, I can give you the quick response, or I can give you the more detailed response. This is a podcast. We're going to go with the detail. All right, so let's talk Taysom Hill. As I mentioned, the most unique player to ever put on a Saints uniform. That's not a stretch to say, right? Yeah. I mean, in its history, has there any been a player even close to that?
Never.
All right, facts first. Turns 34 35, I believe, in August. I'll have to double check his exact birthday, but I believe it's 35 years old. He's set to carry a $17.9 million cap hit because of previous restructures. A straight cut would only net the Saints $277,000 in cap space and would actually end up being less, get into the negative, because Taysom Hill comes off your books, the 52nd player making $950K becomes the 51st player. So that $270 you save gets engulfed into the $950 you add. So you see, you're in the red at that point, and it's just not going to be a good net impact. It's going to be a negative, dollars and cents wise. He missed 9 games a season ago, as you mentioned, played in 8, missed 9. However, I will say this. I think there's a general perception of Taysom Hill that doesn't necessarily match the reality. I think the perception is that he is injury prone. I don't know if that's quite the reality. Last year was obviously his worst. He missed 9 games, had the torn ACL, and there was a couple. Like, he missed a few, got back, then missed a few, and then obviously missed the rest of the season, it was a tough year for him. There's no doubt about that. Missed 9 games total, missed 5 games in 2021. But if you add up his 8-year run in New Orleans, he's missed a grand total of 16 games. If you add it up, now 2017 wasn't a full season for him. He was kind of one of these guys that popped up mid-season. Just was one of those guys, well, who is this guy? And all of a sudden he's running down kickoffs in 2017. But for a guy that had 4 straight season-ending injuries at BYU to only miss 16 games over an 8-year stretch, to me is a step in the positive direction, and it shows he was able to at least successfully overcome the injury-prone label, a devastating injury-prone label that he obviously earned while he was at BYU. But he will be 35, I believe, and coming off a torn ACL. Those are all straight facts. When healthy, though, last year, I think we saw Taysom still had it. In fact, I'll take it one step further. We saw not only did he have it, the offensive coordinator had it when Taysom Hill was on the field. And then when he wasn't on the field, the coordinator seemed to struggle with that being Clint Kubiak. And look, the previous staff really leaned on that versatility, and why wouldn't they? So, what are the Saints' options when it comes to Taysom Hill? Well, as I said, you could just straight up cut him before June 1st, take the dead money hit, but that does nothing to really help your salary cap overages. You're at 47. You'd probably go to 48 after you cut him. If it was a pre-June 1st cut, you could cut him post-June 1st. That would give them $10 million in space, but similar to what we've been arguing when it comes to Derek Carr, you don't get that space until June 2nd. I still think that is an option. If they decide to move on from Taysom Hill, it would be in that regard a cut post-June 1st. You could theoretically trade him. Unlike some other aging veterans on the roster, we all know who the founding father of the Taysom Hill fan club is. Mm-hmm. He resides in Denver now. What would Denver's head coach be willing to give up to get Taysom back in his offense? Another option, you could ask him to take a pay cut. You could ask that. You can say, look, he's set to make a $10 million base salary. All the salary cap number is all the bookkeeping. What he's actually going to make is $10 million in base salary. Would he be willing to drop that down to $5 million, $4 million, whatever, however much you felt like you need to gain the space you would want to have, and make the rest up, say, in some workable incentives that would be relatively easy to attain, or relatively not out of the realm of possibility for him to obtain? Well, that depends on what Taysom may or may not be able to make on the open market. In other words, he could say no, and you force the cut. And if the cut, does Taysom believe if he forced the Saints to cut him, could he come too close to that $10 million that he was set to make with the Saints? Could he come close to that amount elsewhere? Look, as long as Denver's out there, yes, I think there's certainly an option, or at least a chance that he could come near that would force a release. So leverage-wise, I think he may have a little bit more in that regard. Or you could just straight up not do anything and just say, you know what? We got one more year of him on the books. What he gives us versus what he makes, it's a fair value. Straight up keep him, contract as is, and just roll one more season with the Swiss Army knife and find cap savings elsewhere, because you're not going to get a whole lot of cap savings with him. We've already laid it out. And then there's the last option, which is out of the Saints' hands completely, and it can't be ignored. 35 years old, made a lot of money, body's been put through it, rehabbing another injury. Does Taysom Hill say, you know what? It's been fun, deuces, I'm out, and retires? Actually, when you think about it, that would be the most cap-friendly option for the Saints because that $10 million base salary goes away. I don't know if it would be a similar situation what you did with Ryan Ramczyk where he takes the voluntary pay cut, or if he just retires, it comes off the books. I don't know. I'd have to look closer into that. But that would actually be the most cap-friendly thing that would happen to the Saints. Haven't heard anything like that, though. Have you? Any rumors in terms of Taysom Hill thinking about retiring? I do know about a week ago there was a lot out there. I got a lot of text messages. Saints likely to move on from Taysom Hill based off of what looked like a conversation between NFL insiders, but it wasn't really a report. It was more like, hey, this could happen, this may not happen. Of course, when something like that gets aggregated into an article, people tend to take that as fact, but it was very gray. It was never anything concrete in terms of what the Saints are actually going to do when it comes to Taysom Hill. So I don't know what the Saints are going to do, but I'm going to tell you what I would do. Mm-hmm. What I would do if I were looking at all these options.
What would you do?
Yeah, if I were looking at all these options that the team has in their control, I would probably stand pat. Just stand pat and just not touch it. Let Taysom play out the contract and look elsewhere to find the savings. He was still really good last year. You mentioned it. Stats-wise, career high in yards per carry. 7.1 yards per carry, 6 touchdown rushes, 23 receptions, second highest of his career. And remember, he missed 9 games. A young, creative offensive mind like Kellen Moore could look at Taysom Hill and want that kind of versatility in his offense. Remember, Kellen Moore likes to blend to the talent that he has, and you have a unique talent in Taysom Hill. Maybe he wants to keep that around. Remember, Kellen Moore himself even said, the league has been trying to find another Taysom for a long time, but there's only one Taysom Hill. And there's one more piece here, and I don't want to get into too much into a sensitive topic, but I don't think this is out of bounds to bring this up. We know how much Taysom Hill is beloved in this fan base. What we may not realize is how much he's also beloved in the LDS Mormon community. That fan base, huge. The BYU fan bases, they are all in on their guys. He is a hero in that community. Taysom Hill is no longer the sole member of the Church of Latter-day Saints on the Saints roster. So too is, wait for it, Kellen Moore, the new head coach of the New Orleans Saints. Just something to think about. I don't know if it has anything to do with the decision, but I've told you how much he's beloved in the LDS community. You just never know. I don't know which way they will turn. I don't. And I do think there's a very real possibility based off age, injury, coming back from an injury, and salary, the Saints could be forced to move on. And he's not back in 2025. However, if it were up to me, given all the circumstances and given the fact that he can still play, you can't really replace him with anyone. I'm just riding it out with 7 one more year. What about you?
You know, I'm looking at the options that you laid out, keeping him, cutting him, trading him, and asking him to take a pay cut. I'm team keep Taysom because when you look at this Saints offense, this is an offense, and we've talked about it, that's devoid of a whole bunch of playmakers. This isn't an offense with a bunch of Jamar Chases, and you got T. Higgins over here, you got Chase Brown over here, like the Bengals. Taysom Hill is arguably your best playmaker on the team. The only guy that's in the conversation other than him is probably Alvin Kamara.
Yeah.
Taysom and AK are your best 2 playmakers. So at worst, you're talking about the second best playmaker on your team, a team that does not have many playmakers in the first place. You went 4-4 with Taysom playing games this year. If you want to take out the Atlanta game where he started the first half by scoring 2 touchdowns and missed the second half, you're 4-3. Because Taysom, that was one of the games where you can look at it and be like, Taysom made the difference. Because that offense was rolling in the first half. Taysom gets hurt, and they had one of their many second-half collapses. And it's not just the Atlanta game. If you look at what he did against Atlanta, yes, but if you look at what he did against Carolina the second time around, he was really good against the Panthers. And let's not skip over the Cleveland game. 7 carries, 138 yards, 3 rushing touchdowns, 10 targets, 8 catches, 50 yards. Like, Taysom Hill was dominant against Cleveland. Him and Marquez Valdez-Scantling were the reasons that they blew out the Browns like that. One of their most impressive offensive games since week 2. So, to me, I can't think about getting rid of a guy that this offense still needs. I mean, if you do get rid of Taysom, who do you replace him with? Like you said,
Right.
You can look at the tight end position. Do you have a better tight end than Taysom on the roster? I can't say definitively that you do. Outside of Alvin Kamara, is there anybody else that's better with the ball in their hands than Taysom Hill on the roster? No. And even when you look at the receivers, obviously Chris Olave is receiver 1. You throw Rashid Shaheed in there as number 2. Is there any receiver other than the 2 of those that you trust more than Taysom Hill? Taysom Hill is still very much needed on this roster when you're talking about the football conversation. Another option is cutting him. If you're not going to save any money, there's really no point in cutting him unless you wait till June 2nd and get the $10 million back. But again, by then you don't really need it anymore. And if the Saints were to cut Taysom Hill, as soon as he took the first step out of the facility, his phone would start ringing. Mm-hmm. Sean Payton would be on that line like that one ex that was waiting for you to get out your relationship so she could hit you back up. And that would be Sean Payton waiting on Taysom Hill. So I don't think you gain anything by cutting him. You could trade him, sure, but then that gets complicated because obviously there are some teams that could use Taysom Hill's versatility, but he is 35 years old. Mm-hmm. So his age, the compensation, that's where it really gets murky, because while teams can use a Taysom Hill, nobody's giving you a first or a second or a third for a 35-year-old player. So the compensation you get back from Taysom Hill probably wouldn't be worth trading him away. Then when you get to the pay cut, I've said it on here before. I would not take a pay cut no matter how much I love my job. But, you mentioned it. The league has been looking for the next Taysom Hill. Mm-hmm. If Taysom Hill hits the open market, we know Denver would be on that line, but there are some other teams that could use a playmaker and versatile option like Taysom Hill.
We saw Kubiak last year. He's in where's he in Seattle now? So yeah,
that market I'm sure would get a little competitive for Taysom Hill. Like he would have options if he hit the open market. And the last thing that you want to see Taysom do is running all through other teams like he did against Cleveland earlier this season. So when you look at all the options that the Saints can control, obviously I didn't touch on retirement because that's more of a Taysom Hill thing. If he does that, he does that. It's out of everybody's hands but his and his family's. But of the options that the Saints can control, to me the best option is to keep him. And then next year, it's much easier to get from under that contract. You don't have to worry about, can we cut him? The answer is much more clear and obvious. So I say you keep Taysom for at least one more year for, if any other reason, because you need Taysom in this offense right now.
It's funny. Just popped in my head. So if you just take after Drew retired, so after the 2020 season, so from 2021 on, I think I got this right. If you look at the players that have played quarterback, I think they've had the most success under Taysom. Win-loss rise. I think now I don't want to contradict myself because 2020 started it. He was 7-2, but 2020 was part of that. And that's when Drew was still here. So if you just took the 2021, I think he was 4-1 as a starter. 4-1 as a starting quarterback. And just think of how much they've been trying to find the guy to bring them success. It's even when you look at his days as a starting quarterback, you still have had you've had more success with him, wins and losses versus anyone else. I think Jameis probably would be next. I think Jameis went 6-4.
Jameis, Dalton,
and then Carr's 14-13, and I think Dalton would, I don't know, what would he 6-8 or something as a starter. So it's like,
and we did the topic last season. Should the Saints start letting Taysom throw the ball more? And I think the record when Taysom threw more than 10 passes was so lopsided. They won so much more often than they lost when Taysom threw more than 10 passes.
And look, you make a good point about that. The open market, which that usually dictates whether or not a player is going to take a pay cut or not. And it's not the same for everyone. I could see the Saints taking the same approach with Cam Jordan. And I don't know if Cam is going to have the same open market appeal that perhaps a Taysom Hill would. He might. But that's what's going to determine whether or not Taysom would accept that. And honestly, if you probably know that going in, but can you really walk it back once you ask a player to do that? It's almost like if they say no, it's like, oh, well, I guess they're going to have to probably move on from him at this point. Can you really walk it back after that? Right. And you also, you bring up the Denver thing. It's not just that Peyton was the founding father, as I said, of the Taysom Hill fan club. He loves taking credit for it. He loves being the guy that discovered him. He loves being the guy that turned him into this offensive weapon that has taken the league by storm and that has, often imitated, never duplicated around the NFL. So for him to get another, I don't think he likes the idea of, the guy he created basically having success. Because look, I honestly felt like he was better with Kubiak, the way Kubiak used him last year. But Kubiak was so Taysom reliant that I think it ended up catching up to him. And obviously, when he wasn't available, we saw what happened, among other things, obviously. But don't underestimate that I'm telling you, he's that petty. He is that petty that the former Saints head coach would be like, no. I discovered him. I'm bringing him back. He's finishing. And he would be willing to pay Taysom whatever he wanted. No, maybe not whatever, but he would, within reason, he would be willing to probably match that $10 million salary.
Yeah. I could see it happen. And Sean Payton, despite having Bo Nix over there in Denver, a good young quarterback that had a really good rookie season, Taysom Hill is going to find a way to fit into that offense because Denver's offense also could use some playmakers. They traded away Jerry Jeudy. Their running back situation has been in flux. They really don't have a solid guy there. So I think Sean Payton might even take a little page out of the Kubiak book and start using Taysom in even more ways because we've seen, as versatile as he was with Sean Payton had him, he took a step even further.
That's what I'm saying,
after
right.
Sean Payton left. And you can think of so many teams that if you just started playing matchmaker, you're like, well, heck, even the Chiefs could use somebody like that. The Buffalo Bills could use somebody like that. The Baltimore Ravens could, there's probably at least 20 teams that you could look at and be like, yeah, Taysom can have some kind of impact there on that offense in some way.
I look at, it's like, I said this on the show last week. It's like, Kubiak got here last year, and there's this roster of people. And it's like sometimes you'll see in a movie where the vision just kind of goes like this and it's straight on Taysom. Yep. It's like Taysom was the guy, he built it around. Taysom was the guy. It was just, I wasn't even expecting that. To have that much reliance on him and just how much he was able to dictate, or how much Kubiak was able to kind of dictate the rest of what he was doing based off of Taysom's presence. So, and I could certainly see Kellen Moore, even though it's a totally different offense, although we're not quite exactly, I keep saying this. I don't know exactly what kind of offense he runs, but he did say he's more of a gap scheme guy instead of an outside zone type guy. But I could see Kellen Moore wanting that valuable piece within his offense. And maybe this is one of those where if they go with a defensive coach, maybe it's a different answer. But because it's an offensive coach and a young offensive coach who has clearly watched a lot of Taysom Hill, I could see it moving more in that direction. So we'll see what happens with Taysom Hill. But if it were up to me, if it were up to both of us, I think he'd be around for one more year. I know we got a couple more minutes here. I wanted to get to a couple other things. Just really quickly, I mentioned about the combine that starts at the end of the week. Poor Kellen Moore, he can't hang out for Mardi Gras because
he's gonna miss his first
he's gonna
Mardi
be the whole time. He's gonna be in Indianapolis while all the parades are going on.
Well, he came to New Orleans and then wound up earning a parade of a different sort.
Right.
So I guess the championship parade is just gonna have to hold him over.
And he did go back for that parade. We talked about Brandon Staley. They've added Terry Joseph. Yeah. Who is on the, let me see what it is, defensive pass game coordinator, so it's Brandon Staley's hire. Kyle Wilbur, assistant special teams. Terry Joseph is the cousins of Vance Joseph and I believe Mickey Joseph. Look, if you grew up on the West Bank like I did and like you did, the Joseph family are very well known. They were some amazing athletes, and they've all really transitioned pretty well into the coaching ranks. He is another Archbishop Shaw graduate. Actually played college baseball. He was he was the only one that didn't play college football. He played college baseball over at Northwestern State.
I believe he was actually drafted.
Okay.
And I don't know if he ever went, but I know he was drafted at one point, and I didn't realize how local he was because, he played at Shaw. He coached at Shaw. He also coached for Destrehan. He spent a year at LSU. He went to Louisiana Tech. Like, these Louisiana roots run. He played at NSU. So these Louisiana roots run deep for Terry Joseph. So it's cool to see somebody like that who's gotten so much experience in so many different places collegiately take that step to the professional ranks.
I thought it was interesting because the report stated that they were deliberately looking for a college guy for the pass game coordinator position. I wonder if there's just something that, they're seeing a little bit more in the college game that's starting to filter into the pro game that they want to have a coach with a little more experience to help them game plan. Because usually that's what it means with pass game coordinator. He's going to have a huge toll. And I wonder if that means he's going to be the DB coach as well. Probably, maybe so. I don't know. I know he coached DBs at Texas. So I wonder if that's just, when you do that, you're basically helping just design which pass rushes in packages, blitz packages, and coverage you want to run against certain teams that do certain types of things. So that should be interesting as well. So we're getting closer and closer to the full staff being filled out here. All the offense, the special teams now, and 2 of the 4 or 5 defensive coaches should be up. Rest of the week on Wednesday, like I said, I think they arrive in Indianapolis on Wednesday.
Technically, the special teams guys, I think the punters and the kickers will go on Wednesday.
All right. So just be on the lookout because, like I said, that's when news happens, and I wouldn't be shocked if there's more leaks coming out in terms of not just coaches but players.
Yeah.
What's going to happen with certain players and free agents, and what could potentially coming down the road, or could be coming down the road when it comes to that. They'll be looking at draft prospects, but having an eye on free agency because while the draft stuff comes first, free agency gets here first, and then the draft is certainly after that. It's a little weird when it comes to the NFL calendar, but I think everyone's used to it by now. So here we are. The offseason is here.
Yep.
It should be fun. For Andre Johnson Jr., I am Sean Fazende. We'll catch you guys next time on Overtime.